So I can start things off as an introduction. So my name is Katie Perfit. I'm really excited to be here being supported by Mia, who is a youth climate organizer near where I am living. And I've learned so much from Mia's work. So grateful that she's here supporting me to run this workshop. So I work for an organization called 350.org, and we do organizing around the world, mobilizing around the climate crisis and the many crises that it intersects with, including, of course, militarism, imperialism, colonialism, all of the ways that it shows up in the world. So I'm really excited to be bringing this session, which I've led before in different iterations, but to a really different audience than what I would usually present to, although I know we're all, working towards the same vision. So I'm just seeing from Rachel that people are still trickling in. So if you're joining the workshop now, I've asked if people can put in the chat where they're calling in from and your name. That would be great. I can get a sense of where in the world people are. So it looks like we have Vancouverites here, people from Jordan and Brooklyn and Waterloo. That's awesome. I'm calling in and I'm leading this session from unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory near Ottawa, Canada, near the nation's capital. Wow, we've got New Zealand, Oregon, Colorado Springs. Love to see it. So yeah, I'm leading this session from Algonquin and Anishinaabe land, and want to say first and foremost that so much of what I've learned about working with the media has come from the leadership I've seen in Indigenous-led movements here in so-called Canada that are leading the resistance to the extractive economy, and who are also challenging the state and all of the ways that the state is operating to repress Indigenous resistance and Indigenous sovereignty. So just much respect for Indigenous leadership that I've just learned a great amount from, and that obviously, is protecting the planet and our water and our land. So greetings. Sandy from Halifax. We've got Minnesotans. Line 3 campaigning is going strong there. Awesome to hear it. We've got folks from Ottawa, Japan, New Zealand. Amazing. Glad to hear the conference is going well. Okay, I think if I get the thumbs up from Rachel, we'll get rolling. I want to give a few extra minutes for people to trickle in, but also want to make sure we get through the content that we're going to be going through today. So you're here because you want to learn a bit more about media and working with traditional media. This probably isn't going to be your standard Media 101 workshop, but I hope that what I am able to share can give you a really clear understanding of the ways that we can really utilize the wide universe that is traditional media as an aspect of our digital storytelling work and our storytelling work in our movements. Okay, so I also want to say before I get started that I'm not a media professional. I am a community organizer, and so this also would be different probably from the session that you would receive from someone who is in media relations work or is a journalist. So this is really from the perspective of organizers, which I hope is very useful for you all. So 3 of the things that we're going to go through today, we're going to talk a bit about just understanding the media and journalists in particular. We're going to talk about how to create people-powered media plans. And then we're going to go through some storytelling principles I live by that I hope you will see as useful in bringing into your own work. So understanding the media, this part of the call is going to be much more conversation oriented, and I really want to hear from you all. And talking about why journalists get into the work that they're into, I think can really help us when we are thinking about how we're going to engage media and journalists when we are doing campaign work. And so just want to preface this all by saying, even when journalists agree with us, and I know many of you have experienced the situation when they don't, but even for journalists who agree with what we're doing, they often have restrictions on what and how they can cover issues. So understanding journalists can make us more effective when we're trying to work with them. So I'd love to hear from people in the chat. What are some of the reasons you think that people become journalists? So I'd love for you to type it in the chat. What are some of the reasons that you become, or that you think people become journalists? To tell alternative stories. Thank you, Hannah. Because they have a passion for storytelling. Yep. To reveal the truth. To help share and uplift voices or stories. Yep, it's considered an exciting and adventurous career, and it can take people all over the world. Ali says it can really vary. Some people are genuinely truth tellers, but some may also be coming through a revolving door. It can be an easy second career for government workers. That's very true, like the pundit class. Bring issues to the community level. Yeah, love those. Okay, now I'm curious. Which of these values and reasons overlap with your own values and reasons for doing the campaign and organizing work that you all are doing in your communities? They want to tell the truth. As organizers, we want to tell the truth of how the war machine, climate chaos, how it impacts our lives. Yeah, we're seeking truth. Some people in the group are natural storytellers and love to write. They want to grow support for their issue. Yep, 100%. Yet caring about people and their stories and wanting to educate the masses. So I love all of these, very on point. And what are then the different kinds of restrictions journalists have to carry out those values? So what are the things that might be holding them back from being able to, tell the stories directly as we as organizers would want them to be told? They have to show some kind of balance. Yeah. So we've all seen the stories where, you have to have both sides of the issue, even though, maybe 90% of the population is on side with one side of the issue. There's like a loud vocal resistance that they have to include. This definitely comes up in climate change, although it's getting better, like, wanting to share the climate science, but also share that, there are some people that don't believe in climate science. Their media organization may be really restrictive in terms of the types of story they're able to share, that corporate control. Yeah. Advertisers, influence. Sorry, my dog is always in the background. Okay. Restrictions on media in general. Like I see, maybe there's places where there is no real journalism that's able to be undertaken because of repressive governments, for example. Conflicts of interest, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I like this one. The media organizations reward journalists who get traffics and clicks, not necessarily who tell the most compelling and deep and rich and important stories. Death threats, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So these are all excellent. I really appreciate them. And I think just from what's coming up in the chat, I also want to acknowledge that I'm coming to this session really from experience of living in Canada, where there is, to to a certain degree, a lot of journalistic freedom. So yeah, I just want to say that yeah, that's just what's informing the way that I'm presenting this, and like big love and solidarity with people who are trying to tell stories in places where it's much harder to do that for many reasons. Okay, so now I want to get a sense of, in the room, like, what are different ways that you all will utilize the media? So what are the ways that you would seek to have your story covered in the media? So one of the examples I give here is getting an op-ed published in a local newspaper. Letters to the editor, yep. So those are shorter pieces, but like smaller opinion points. Other ideas? Yep, blogs, online blogs are great. Writing press releases and media advisories to get journalists to cover an event, an action. Yeah, other digital content like circulating petitions. Interacting directly with journalists on Twitter, love that. It's a really good way to get journalists to like understand your issue, and it can make them feel like they're a sought after person in the conversation. Personal contact with, yep. We can utilize the media in our community actions, yep. Inviting local publications to our events. Some other things, just want to lift up some other ways that media can tell our story. Like we could be on the 6 o'clock news on TV. We can get an ad placed on a radio station. Are there other things like that, like other ways the media tells our story? How do you digest information from the media? So I think a lot of us think about print newspaper, but there are so many other ways. Yeah, social media, so sharing articles online, billboards, yeah. I ask people to share these because I think often when we go into designing our media plans, we often think very narrowly of like, our media plan is our media advisory, our press release, and the article that the journalist writes. Yeah, you could get them to even MC your event, so they're really in it. Great. All right. Yeah, giving interviews. So you don't have to always be live on air. You can give interviews that would last, that could last online in other ways. Awesome. Okay, so that was really great. I appreciate that. There probably are going to be examples like this that come up as you think more about this training. But what I want to get us to a place of is thinking about how we can actually design a media campaign. So I've got the goal always being, we want to put decision makers in a decision dilemma. We want to undermine the legitimacy of an institution, for example. Some of the things that one of the things that I'm always thinking about is like, how can I get under the skin of Justin Trudeau and his two-facedness on climate and Indigenous rights? So I always want to figure out how we can get our stories in front of the power holders. So yeah, this is, we're going to talk more about designing a media plan that works. So I want you all to get into the headspace right now of this scenario. And I think something similar could have happened around a year ago had this conference happened in person. But there's a weapons expo coming up in our city. We're all together, and we want our MP, our member of parliament, who is the Minister of Defense, to step down as a speaker at the expo. So yeah, go into your minds about all of the things that this expo is about. Some of the goals we want to achieve are raising awareness about the issue related to this expo, like why is it bad that all of these like arms manufacturers are coming to our city, why it's bad that our politicians are attending, why it's bad that different political organizations are in this space with politicians. And then we want to also engage the dozens of highly engaged organizers and activists in our community around this event and through our media plan. And we want to put our target, who is that member of parliament, into a decision dilemma and have them step down as a speaker. So how would you use media to advance some of these goals? Okay, so Noel, I don't know how to say it, tabling at farmers market and other local events. I'm thinking like, yeah, that could definitely be it. What about more media focused tactics? Or maybe could we have the media come and cover us tabling at a farmer's market? What other tactics do people think we could do? So I see, Brian, your comment is maybe we use really strong framing, using street theater in the market area. Yeah, I want you to think specifically, how do we engage the media towards our goals? So how could the media help us raise awareness about the issues of this expo? What ways could we engage with the media to do that? How could we engage dozens of people in media organizing? Letter to the editor writing campaign, that's a great one, specifically for engaging organizers. Is we could together make a list of all of the print publications and everyone write a letter to the editor or an article so we can get it covered in all of the publications in our city. Yeah, Irene, I really like what you said, contacting the opposition. So something that you could do is pitch a story to a journalist to say, this expo is coming up. It would be really great if you could cover it. Of course, this is our angle as organizers. These are the different people you could talk to. Often journalists are really receptive when we pitch them an idea. And they could be even more receptive if you're willing to support them with making connections as well. Yeah, Sandy, exactly. Pitching the idea to a freelance journalist. One of the things that I wanted to share here, and we'll talk about a bit later, is like maybe we contact radio journalists and pitch the story to them, so it's, you know, on the news while people are driving or commuting. Yeah. Maybe we also, you know, really elevate this, like someone had said earlier, is engaging with media on Twitter. Maybe making a media list with all their Twitter accounts, journalists, so that when the opportunity arises, that journalists will actually put the decision maker in a decision dilemma on the issue that you care about. So really elevating that issue to the attention of journalists can help then down the road when those journalists want to press that politician on something. Release a public service announcement. Yeah, you could make like you know, a statement for your organization, do a press release online and share it with journalists. Yeah, love all of these. Okay, so I'm going to shift to the next slide now. And with all of these ideas that you've talked about and considering our goals, we want to raise awareness, engage supporters, and put your target on the spot. Would love to hear, if we were planning from today and this expo was happening in the first weekend of September, how would you build your campaign plan with, specifically with media? How would you build your campaign plan to escalate over the course of those months? So what I mean by that is, when we're looking at today, we definitely have we want to take the time to build a foundation for the campaign that we're going to run. And we want to build momentum over the course of those months so that we are able to get to the point where our MP is really in a tough spot, whether to actually do this speaking event or not. So would love to hear from you in the chat. Like, what would you start off with? What tactics with the media would you use to build momentum? And then what kinds of things would you do around that speaking event or in the lead up to that speaking event to really make it so that that politician could not do that thing? And so suggest some tactics, but also tie them to media and why you think that's important. Okay, so, okay. So create nice posters and take them in downtown streets. So that's really great in terms of like raising awareness about an issue. So that's a great tactic. And yeah, that also might alert it to the attention of the media, but you could also like do a press release to say like community posters entire downtown core to raise awareness about this issue. Maybe the media would want to come and cover that at the start of your campaign because yeah, this is a really new and emergent issue on the scene and they want to cover it. Yeah, allied podcasters, that's great as well, especially when you're trying to build awareness about a campaign, is to have that, you know, maybe a half an hour or an hour-long conversation with a podcaster that you can then share on social media afterwards and that can really help like ground your issue. Radio is a good one too, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but one of the things you can do is suggest that a radio call-in show is themed around this conference. Yeah, I'm going to share a really great example of this but later on, but often, like the CBC in particular, will have radio call-in shows about certain topics, and you could actually pitch to them that they cover this event and then encourage people who you organize with to actually be the ones calling in and providing comments. Okay, find a comment that the MP made against your actions and bring it up in the media. And that's like a really great thing as well for journalists to have on hand, so that when they do press an MP that they can bring it up to them. So that might be something that you want to release like as an escalation tactic to say, like, you know, a month before to say, this politician said this, and now they're speaking at a weapons expo. And that can really escalate the story. Yeah, you can create tactics that, you know, in having a community town hall and saying the MP should be here to speak to this. Will they come? When they don't come, because they probably won't, that's media story unto itself. Yeah, so I'll just share a few more things that could work really well. So like we said at the start, you know, we really want to get the broad public understanding this issue. So tactics like your letters to the editor, your opinion pieces in newspapers, doing interviews on the radio, those are all great ways to share information about your campaign. And those are tactics as you escalate your messaging over time. If you want to engage people who are really supportive of your campaign work, have them write letters to the editor and opinion pieces. Have them pitch radio call-in shows, call into radio shows, have them sharing content like podcast episodes on their social media. And then as you get closer to the action day, really making sure that it's always on the ears of journalists in your community so that they're more empowered and encouraged to bring this up to your target decision maker. And then of course, you want to tell the story afterwards of what happened. So maybe with whatever result of your campaign, issuing a press release that then the journalist, maybe the journalists that have been following your campaign can then write a conclusion story about your event. So those are all really great. And yeah, just I guess to say again, what's really important about creating your media plan is you want to think about it as how do we escalate our storytelling tactics, but also how do we escalate the story over time? How do we go from wanting to create awareness about the issues of this issue to really putting your target in a decision dilemma? And so making a campaign plan like this can really help you think about the different phases in the way that you're telling your story. And so we definitely encourage, if you are building a campaign, to not only timeline out the tactics that you're going to do, but also the storytelling plan that you're going to roll out as well. And hopefully my Wi-Fi is doing okay here. I have I have real internet issues all the time. Okay, so hopefully by the end of your campaign, you'll have your target thinking to himself, damn, maybe I shouldn't speak at that weapons expo. These activists have really made it a toxic move for me to make. This is just a stock photo. I don't know who this guy is, so hopefully he doesn't mind that I used it for this means. Okay, now I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling principles to live by. And yeah, these are just things I've picked up along the way, and I'm gonna share them through stories. So I think one of the things as organizers and activists that we forget is that we actually need to make our actions media worthy. Just because we have 50 people in a banner doesn't mean the media are going to want to come out and cover it. And so we need to actually think about what is the thing we're doing. So making the tactic an exciting and innovative one, and also making it really clear to journalists that the action that you're going to take will help tell a compelling story. So yeah, I think one of the great examples of this, and it's in this picture here, is, and someone else brought it up in the chat, is using street theater. This was from a campaign that we ran in 2019, our organization, with young people all across the country. And we were pushing the CBC, Canada's public broadcaster, to host a national leaders climate debate. So all of the people who were running to be the prime minister, we wanted them to have a debate about climate change. At the time, it was the #1 issue for people in Canada. And even now it still is, in addition to COVID and the public health crisis. And so we were pushing our public broadcaster to host that leaders debate. And one of the things we wanted to do was have rallies outside of CBC headquarters all across the country. But we knew just having a bunch of young people at a CBC headquarters was not going to be enough for this story to be covered. And so organizers across the country incorporated really visual and exciting elements to these rallies that made for great media content. This is an image that was taken outside of the headquarters in Toronto, and there was an art collective that did a really incredible theatrical performance that hyped up the crowd and just made it an incredibly exciting event for participants to be at. And you can also see their visuals. So there's signs that we had at every action across the country that shared the same design. You can see it says 11 years. Those were standard across the country so that we really had a strong visual identity to our actions that were really eye-catching for people who were looking at our content in the news and on social media. So that helped to make our action newsworthy because there was, that visual element. The tone of the events was invigorating. All of those things really helped to make the action something that people wanted to go to. So this is just one example. Here in Ottawa, with the organizers that I worked with, what we did was earlier that year, we had experienced incredible flooding across the region. And so we actually took sandbags, filled them up, and wrote letters on each of the bags, and it said climate emergency. And for people who were, we told media ahead of time, we're going to have visuals that make the connection between our political crises on climate and our physical experiences of the climate crisis. So journalists knew when they were coming, they were going to have something really visually compelling to cover in their stories. So make your actions newsworthy. There's a resource that is linked in the slide, and I'm going to share the slide deck with all of you at the end of this, so you'll have this training slide deck for yourselves. There's a resource on how to create newsworthy actions, and just really encourage you. You can also look at 350 Canada's or 350.org's website in general to look at people all around the world in your regions as well that are creating incredibly newsworthy actions that really are, earning the attention of the media. I mean, our issues deserve the attention of the media, but we know that with all of the ways that media doesn't work in our favor, we have to work extra hard. So make your actions newsworthy. That's one principle I live by. So the other one is that the radio can be our movement's megaphone. And I'm really sharing this from the perspective of a Canadian, a Canadian audience. But here in Canada, we have the CBC as our national public broadcaster, and they have regional and city level shows. They have national shows like the Cross Country Checkup, which happens every Sunday. And they have radio call-in shows for people to call in and talk about certain issues. So those journalists who host those show segments are always looking for topics to cover. And I mean, they're covering everything from the butterfly migrations to to pipeline fights, to how to, cooking certain kinds of food. It's all of the above. And so all of those journalists you can find on Twitter and suggest different segments that they can host around certain issues. And so what we've done multiple times with our organization is train people on how to engage their local CBC radio organization to host themed events that are related to climate change, and then actually train their base on how to effectively communicate about their issue over radio. And so with this, I'm sharing a resource. We actually ran a training on this that lives online. You're welcome to check it out. And you can also check out a blog that was written by young organizers in Toronto, Cricket and Simran, who talk of using radio shows to really amplify the message around climate. And I think, I don't think this is unique to Canada. I know there's lots of different, even if it's not your national public broadcaster, radio shows do call-in shows all the time. And so, just how can you build a strategy around that? So think about what would you and your team need to do to really utilize your local radio broadcaster. So radio can be our movement megaphone. And then the third principle I want to share is just the importance of not waiting for journalists to cover your issues. And this might seem counter to a Media 101 training, but in the age of digital technology, but also just, because we absorb stories from the world in so many different ways, we need to create our own media. And when we do that, we can tell our stories in ways that really reflect our values. I'm sure we've all been in situations before where media comes to cover our event, and they don't cover it in the way that we would want the story to be told. When you're creating your own media, you have creative control over what that looks like. And our stories and the ways that we want to tell stories can help build relationships and empathy between groups of people. That is so important always. They have the ability to compel people to take action and stay involved in the movements that we're all a part of. And they can really hit people in the heart and help take situations beyond headlines and facts and numbers, but really something that remains and is lasting. We, as organizers, are in a position where we really need to encourage people to tell their stories, understanding that everyone has a stake in the crises that we're facing. Everyone has people that they can uniquely resonate with, and so we really need as many people in our movements telling stories and bringing people into this work. And the growth of digital tools, it makes it so much easier for us to do this work. 350.org at a global level has an incredible resource right now. It's kind of a community of practice. It's our digital storytelling hub. There's a toolkit that's linked there, which helps you to learn all about the different ways you can create your own media. But I also wanted to share a bit more about this campaign that we ran with young people in the 2019 election, and just reflect how central storytelling was in that campaign. You'll see that I shared a screenshot of this blog on our website. One of the things that we did in that campaign is we trained organizers across the country in what's called public narrative. So it's basically, what is your personal story? How do you relate to the issues in your community? And how can you compel people to take action? So we trained organizers in basically like how to relate and convey their stake in the climate crisis. And one of the people who was part of that training was a leader named Stephen. He is a worker in the fossil fuel industry based in Edmonton. And he shared just a powerful story about his relationship with his father, who is also a machinist, and why he believes in a transformative vision that centers climate justice. And that blog on our website, the our-time.ca/Stephen, was the most visited page on our website aside from the petition that we had. And it was the most shared piece of digital content from our website. And I think that, to me, it really conveys how compelling public narrative and people's personal stories can be. And yeah, just how resonant his story was with so many people. And so really want to encourage folks to think about the many ways you could create your own media. And there's resources in our digital organizing toolkit, but some of the simple ways that we've been doing that on the 350 Canada team is by uplifting the voices of volunteers in our organizing network. We create meme content, we create videos of people speaking that we post on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. We've tried using more unconventional digital tools like Snapchat. So we've used Snapchat before and other tools. So yeah, just want to think about, again, how do you receive information and stories about the world is how other people do as well. And so when you're thinking about your media plan, also think about, okay, what are the other ways we can tell this story to make sure that the story that we want to have conveyed reaches as many people as possible. All right. So I believe that's the end. So I'm going to actually go back here. And I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions from you all. So I believe if you, Mia, maybe you can help me out. I believe with the moderation panel, folks can raise their hand to speak. And so you can either speak out loud or you can write a question into the chat that you have for me, and other people can chime in as well. So Mia, are the people in the moderation panel folks we can bring off mute to ask questions?
Yeah, so you have to click on the, like, if you click on their icon, then there's like a little plus and you can bring them up. Do you want me to do like one at a time?
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so then once
Hey, Brian.
I kind of invite you, you can unmute yourself, put your camera on. So I think Brian is your name. I think now you're up. Yeah.
Great. Well, Brian, do you have a question to ask? Oh, he's unable to unmute. Okay. You can type your question into the chat if you'd like.
Yeah. I'll bring up someone else. And I think I'll just like switch out people as we go. That way we don't have too much confusion going on.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
So I'm just going to read while we're waiting. Dick says, I created an annual Letters to the Editor Awards Night, which drew 200 people each year for the past few years. This story is in my book at, Adventures for a Post Activist Lawyer. Amazing. Activism is the rent I pay for living on the planet. Love that. That is such a cool way to celebrate people who are telling stories in their community. Thank you for that. Okay, I'll pass it over to Dwyer. Oh, Dwyer doesn't have any questions. Okay. Any social media strategies for improving chance of a meme or post going viral? Okay, so this is also a really fun thing for me to talk about. So the main thing I would say is have more people's brains thinking about memes. The creative process is always better when you're doing it with a team of people. And our organizing team actually, and our digital organizer, Chris, in Canada, he supports a team of digital content producers that are all volunteers, and they together come up with some of the best meme content. So if you go to @350Canada on Instagram, you'll see some of those. And yeah, I don't think there's like a formula for like things to go viral, but I do think the more brains you have doing that creative process, the better content you're going to produce. So that would be what I would say is like figure out a way, whether that's on WhatsApp or if you have a Slack space or another way that you have conversations to like, just jam out and create content that is great. And so the stuff that you see on our 350 Canada Instagram is all because volunteers and our staff are like figuring out how to make the meme better. And I think that goes for like a lot of content as well, of like if you're writing or if you're going to do an interview, practicing and preparing with other people helps to make sure you don't have tunnel vision and that you're getting your message across. So okay, we have Terry.
I just more of a comment than a question. Like you said, preparing in 30-second sound bites. It's really important to do it that way. And I remember I was interviewed, and in the end, I made an off the cuff comment. about, oh, they just want their rest. Guess what was the only thing? And the entire city council was pissed. So yeah, you've got to guard yourself, even though.
Yeah, nothing's off the record ever if you're being interviewed by journalists. And one thing that even if it means that in an interview, I'm like this, like I literally am going, like, don't say that thing. Don't say anything you don't want to be quoted saying to a journalist, because chances are they're going to quote you saying it. And I want to share this story back when I was a very baby organizer. Stephen Harper was still the Prime Minister in Canada, and he was trying to push through this, what was called Bill C-51, which was basically what it was trying to do was restrict the freedom of protest for organizers, but in particularly it was targeted at Indigenous organizers. And a local journalist approached me. I'd never done a media interview before. And we had the interview. It lasted like 15, 20 minutes. I thought I was prepared. I had my speaking notes, and then him and I just had a conversation. And he was asking me my opinion and kind of reflecting back to me a lot of the same opinions that I had. And it ended up being that none of the things that I had prepared in my speaking notes made it in, but a lot of things that were my own personal frustrations and things made it into the article that was actually in my small town newspaper. And so it just really didn't click with the audience that I was trying to resonate with. I said things like Stephen Harper is a fascist pig, and I was quoted saying that. Just things that I believe, but weren't really going to resonate with the audience that I was trying to make understand the issue. And so, yes, Terry, 100% agree with you. Never say anything to a journalist you don't want to be quoted as saying. And I would say that when you're at Actions as well, you are responsible for your conduct, and there is going to be media around. And so you have to be really mindful of what you say, because anything that you say in a public space could end up in the media. So I think that's also an important lesson as well. Okay, so maybe as we get a next question up in our moderation panel, in these days of demassified media, how important is the mainstream media today? That's an existential question. I don't know if I have an answer for that, but I would say, at least in my experience, seeing where stories end up can be a real weather vane for where your issue is at. So, yeah, I think, for example, even if your articles are making it into mainstream media, major news outlets, I think that can be a sign for organizers that you're really hitting that critical mass in your organizing. You've really taken your campaign to the fever pitch. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. Maybe other people have things they want to share for an answer to that in the chat. Yeah, and Brian, your comment there, they're really two different medias. And I think that's maybe also a principle I live by, is when I'm deciding what my media and storytelling tactics are at large, I'm always thinking about who is the audience I'm trying to reach and what is the message I want them to hear. So when we do, a lot of the messages that we try to convey on, for example, our Instagram, we're really tailoring to a younger audience, because we know that most of our audience on Instagram are millennials or younger. When we're on radio, for example, we know that is a little bit older of an audience, because the radio is used more by older folks. And same goes for print media. So, but I think also, we think about too, like the digital sharing of that content as well. And so for articles that print media posts on their websites, sharing that on Facebook is going to bring a really different audience than what we would share on Instagram. So I think when you're mapping out your campaign plan, is picking those media or storytelling tactics as they relate to the audience that you're trying to reach. Okay, passing it to Dick for a question or comment. Are you able to unmute yourself? Maybe I can help with that.
There we go. Hi.
No.
If you want to hear the story about letters to the editor awards,
we'll have Dick, we'll have to get you to ask your question in the chat because we can't hear you.
I can hear him if everyone else can. I don't know what's going on with that, but I can hear him when he speaks. I'm not sure if everyone else can, but hopefully.
Maybe people could weigh in.
Okay, yeah, I think most people can hear him, I think.
Okay.
Well, anyway,
sorry. There we go. I hear it now.
Over the years, I saw the power in letters to the editor, really good letters to the editor. And I saw also how our opposition lays out their points, and sometimes they don't have any points. They just have name calling and whatnot. So I decided to try and create an evening built on letters to the editor, the most powerful letters to the editor published in a year, and give awards to the very best ones and to the very worst ones. We gave awards like Best Letter from Another Planet, and so on. We had a real good time with this event every year. And we went from about 40 people in attendance to about 250 people in attendance each year. And what I did was, through that, built sort of an organization. So this started in the late 1990s. And when the war came along, the war against Iraq, we were pretty well situated to write letters to the editor and to bombard, bombard them with our thoughts on the subject, and to reward each other with with awards for the best letter and so on, the most satirical letter, the funniest letter, all of those kinds of awards. You can create great awards and have a very creative evening. We started out with a very boring evening because I thought the power was in the letters, so I just read them. But somebody came and said, you can make this better by having rehearsed actors, create a script out of the letters and have rehearsed actors reading from the letters and responding to each other. So that's how we ended up with over 250 people every year to attend this particular event. It was a very popular event, but we got kind of burned out putting it on. We had food and everything, so it was great. But I urge people to try and think creatively about doing things like that, because you can create. We went through about 7,000 letters a year in order to create this event for 16 years. But you can do it, easier and cheaper and so on. And don't look for the big newspapers. Look for your smaller newspapers, because the big newspapers aren't going to print your letter. Usually, you can't count on them. You have to target some smaller newspaper and say, okay, we're going to give awards to the best and worst letters in this particular paper for the calendar year. And that's how we did it.
Amazing. I love that. And yeah, I just posted in the chat. You can do it on like zero budget. And if you're with an organization who wants to have like a tool that you're asking, like everyone in your organization across a region to do a letter to the editor, there's New Mode has a great tool. So basically what you do is your organizing team hammers out a bunch of different letters to the editor. And then they're all uploaded into this database, and New Mode has a list of basically every print publication in Canada and I think in the US as well. And so when people put in their postal code, they get a template letter to the editor that pops up. They can edit it how they want and submit it, and it submits directly to that newspaper. So if you have that kind of resources, that's great, but also you don't need any resourcing. You can do that with, Google Docs and email. So awesome. And then I wanted to answer one question that was in the chat. How do you deal with misinformation and propaganda? That's ripe in the climate world, especially with the fossil fuel lobby and right-wing organizations. I think for us as an organization, what we're just always trying to do is make it clear who benefits from misinformation. So, for example, when we ran a campaign targeting the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau around a corporate sponsorship by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, we really highlighted what the benefits are to the oil and gas industry in Canada by having their logos in trusted institutions. So I think always pointing out who benefits from that propaganda is a way to counter it, because I think people understand power. And so if you can make those connections for people, that's really helpful. I'm going to pass to Ali.
Hi. So my background is in graphic design and marketing. So my question is around like storytelling angles. Like based on my marketing experience, it's like a really clear marketing principle is that people generally respond better to positive storylines than negative ones. And I think especially with a lot of the Trump coverage that was happening in the media, a lot of people are really burned out by like headlines and media and art that has a super negative angle and is meant to infuriate or make you sad. So, and not that that feeling is wrong, but just that it might not be as effective as something that is more positive. Do you feel like that principle generally translates to activism? And if so, do you have any examples of like successful activist campaigns that had a positive, especially with art or sort of like this performance art theater type?
Yeah. So I think for me, I never want to put out content where people don't have a way to take action on the issue. So yeah, for me, I'm always trying to situate the content that we're putting out into the world through our work through a campaign that has a really smart strategy. And I think that's the way we counteract the burnout, the hopelessness is, and I forget who said this. It's like definitely a famous organizer, but that action is the antidote to despair. And of course, we're going to feel despair with all of the crises that we face. But and that's our responsibility as organizers, right? We want to make sure that people have a way to take action on these issues that are so laden with, despair and frustration and hopelessness. So yeah, when we give people that way to take action through our stories, then we're able to be the kind of antidote to those feelings. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's like, there's no like design element of that I think would resonate with like a graphic design principle or something like that. But yeah, I guess to me, it just comes down to making sure people have a way to take action on the issue that's in front of them. So they're not just reading ahead, wallowing in that reality to make an impact. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Right, so there's 2 more people who wanted to ask questions. They're in the waiting like part of the thing, but we're pretty much out of time. Do you want me to just add both of them? They can both ask their questions and then.
Yeah, for sure. And I dropped my information in the chat, so anyone who wants to connect with me. And I didn't do this yet, but there is the link to the slide deck. So if you want to look at it after, people are more than welcome to look at it. Feel free to make a copy of it and use it. I'm not precious about it. Okay,
Hi.
Brian. Sally, do you have a question? No? Okay. And Brian, do you have a question? Okay, then you all are showing your faces to help celebrate the end of this session. Appreciate you all for being here. Mia, appreciate you endlessly. Miss you so much.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this. There was a lot of great information.
Awesome. And thank you all for joining, and best of luck with the rest of the conference.